Hi there. My name is Billy Byrne from Kinch Lines, and I'm going to talk to you about the Pearman Personality Integrator. So maybe we should kick off immediately with a quick question, and that is, why do we think we might need another personality tool? I've been working with personality profile tools for quite a number of years, and the Pearman is something a bit different than some of the other tools, and as you'll see what those differences are as we go through this presentation. But really, I think, why do we need another personality tool? Well, I think it's because we need to move beyond just psychological awareness and understanding of personality into psychological development. So what do we do with that information, and really bridging that gap. So this, I suppose, echoes what Keane and Lahey had to say. They said, essential element of psychological development is the capacity to become aware of how your psychology functions and to use that awareness for intentional choices. So making those choices, I think, is where Pearman comes in, because it helps us to firstly become aware of our psychology through psychological type, but also to look at what choices we can make in that development. So this is about two things, really. It's about self-awareness, and then it's also about adaptability. And those are the foundation stones on which Pearman is built. So some of the existing tools that we've got, well, here are some of the limitations I think that are out there. Firstly, can be a little bit too stereotypical. In other words, they're stereotyping people into, a type, you are this type, so therefore. And also a lot of the either or, well, you're either this or you're that. Rather than seeing personality as being more of a continuum. Obviously, there's also an emphasis on natural preference, but not so much about what you actually demonstrate. So yes, great, it's really good from a self-awareness point to know what your natural preferences are and how we say gather information and make decisions. But really, there isn't a move with these other tools into looking at, well, what do you actually do in practice? Most tools, apart from Pearman, there is key information missing, and that we don't get the whole picture. So depending on, particularly when we look at type, so if we look at, our preference for extroversion, we don't really get to see, well, what's the introversion side of that? And there's no assessment of adaptability generally. This is very much something included in Pearman. So what is personality? What's personality type? It comes from the work of Carl Jung, and there's no agreed definition of personality, but this is just a good working definition for us, I think. Characteristic patterns of thoughts and behaviors that make a person unique. So let's just have a look at, when I talk about type, most people are aware of the terms extroversion and introversion. So this is really about energy. So I'm going to just talk through a few of these about what personality type is. So again, based on the work of Carl Jung, extroversion versus introversion, where we get our energy from. So extroversion is about external experience, our stimuli in the outer world, and it's about directing our energy towards the world and the people in it, but also we get energy from the external world. That's what energizes us. If our preference is more for introversion, we're more focused on our internal world, or our inner world of experience, and we direct energy towards that. We put energy into that inner world, but also we get energy from that. So it's very much where we get our energy from and what energizes us. Also part of personality type is how we gather information. So whenever we are dealing with the world, we take in information and then we base our decisions on that, and we come up with conclusions based on the information. So we can gather information in a number of ways. Again, we can gather information from the external world in a number of ways, and also from the internal world in a number of different ways. And when we come to conclusions or make decisions, which we do all the time, again, we can do that in a kind of an external world manner or in an internal world manner. So you can see, starting with the extroversion and introversion, now looking at these areas of gathering information, which is called perceiving in Jung's terminology, and coming to conclusions, which is called judgment in the either external world or internal world. So let's look at Pearman personality. Now that we've seen just at a high level what personality type is, how does this play out in the Pearman personality model? So as you can remember, we looked first at extroversion and introversion. So those are kind of building blocks here that we look at. Where do we gather, where do we direct our energy? So on one side then we have perceiving, this as we spoke about. Where do we and how do we gather information? Two different ways of doing that. One is sensing, which is very practical or detailed, and one is intuiting, which is very much about scenarios, abstract, and themes. And then also judging, how do we make decisions? And again, there are two manners in which we do this. We can engage, make decisions based on thinking, on logic, or on feeling, which is more people-driven and value-driven. So, but that's not the full picture, because remember, when we look at this, we said that, well, yeah, but these S, N, T, and F, sensing, intuiting, thinking, and feeling, these can be directed in different ways. So this is where we really get down to the detail of the model. So we're down into what Jung called the functions. So we have extroverted sensing and extroverted intuiting. In other words, that's the way we gather information from the external world in two ways. And then we can make judgments and make decisions, I should say, again, in two different ways, based on logic or based on people, let's say, or feelings. But again, with an extroverted attitude. And then on the other side, you've got a similar, again, an introverted version of those, an inner world version of gathering information and making decisions. So now, if you like, the entire model is there. You've got that top extroversion attitude, bottom attitude, perceiving and judging on the sides. And then in the middle, we have the functions. And those eight, the engines here are the eight: the extroverted sensing, intuiting, thinking, feeling, and introverted sensing, intuiting, thinking, and feeling. And this is basically the model of personality type that we use. And many personality profiling tools are based on this. But just show you how this works in the case of Pearman. So let's have a so we look at let's just have a look at what Jung had to say about types. He was very clear on this. He said, it's not the purpose of psychological typology to classify human beings into categories. This would be pretty pointless. So he's warning us not to take, a set of letters and say, well, that's me. I'm now a category. So I am that because of that particular personality, that is me. It is not a description of a person. So let's have a look at, firstly, the extroverted perceiving functions. Just get an understanding of what these are like. So extroverted sensing, very much about action, experience, outer world. The extroverted intuiting, big picture brainstorming. So that's a deeper look at that. So extroverted sensing, external facts, gathering facts from the external world, getting immediate information for the immediate situation, that urgency to do things, and experiential activities, like what is it like to do this out in the world. So that's extroverted sensing. So just, again, compare that with extroverted intuiting, a very different way of dealing with information. So we are sharing ideas about the big picture. I often think about brainstorming here, as you can see in the picture that's on screen, the post-it notes. So discussing possibilities with other people, discussing themes and patterns, not details, themes. What's emerging here? Talking about those emerging options, sharing them, and outward associations, innovator concepts. So that gathering of information, again, is in the outer world, but very different in the extroverted sensing. So if we look at the perceiving functions, again, let's look at the introverted sensing. What's the difference here? Well, this is focusing on detail and tasks, but this is something that's in my inner world. So internally verifying information to ensure consistency. So I might have got some external world information, but I'm actually checking it versus my internal checklist. Remembering tried and true options, things that I've done in the past, that's also information as well. And recalling precise information, but recalling it myself rather than going out and gathering it. So this is the introverted sensing, whereas the introverted intuiting, I think I sometimes think about the daydreaming element of this, internally envisioning connections, understanding associations, trusting your gut feelings, or actually tapping into your gut feelings and trying to get a gut feeling on things. Looking at connections, patterns, possibilities, and theories, been very much energized by the theories. So those are four very different ways of gathering information before we go and use that to make decisions. So if we looked at the judging functions, so this is where we actually make the decisions or come to conclusions. So let's look at extroverted thinking, and you see again, the picture on screen shows, people working together using data. So it's a process of presenting objective information, facts and figures, logic, applying very systematic analysis to problems. You'll notice not a lot of mention of people here. It's very much around the evidence. What are the numbers? What's the data on that? Compared with extroverted feeling, again, this is the teamwork, again, looking at the image that people working together as a team, so it's connecting with others, seeking harmony, promoting that interpersonal development, and concern for the team itself as a team. And then trying to understand and really listen to other people's point of view when making a decision and gathering and working with that. Versus, if we look at the introverted versions of these, the introverted thinking, is that making decisions on one's own, like understanding the logical basis for information, looking at the analytical principles behind the decision, really working maybe, let's say, autonomously, and coming up using one's own mental framework to make a decision. And then the introverted feeling is tapping into your own values, having your own mission, and maybe those ideas, what's meaningful to me when I'm making decisions, that feeds in as well. So as you can imagine, a really good way of gathering information and making decisions will be to tap into all of these. But of course, our preference means that we have, because the way personality type works, we have certain preferences for one type of gathering information over another, or way of making decisions over another. But obviously, if we can flex around those and gather information from using all of the different of the functions, and also make a more rounded decision making, that's going to give us better outcomes in work and in life. So look at the Pearman report. Just your sense of how Pearman looks at this, how we might assess this, and why it is a bit different than some of the other tools. So the first one is that you'll notice when this will really strike you when you first do a Pearman profile, is that you're not presented with a dichotomy, like questions like, are you this or that? You are giving a slider bar. And the way the slider bar works is you're given a pairs of questions every time. So you give a pair of questions and you're asked for the top question, the first of the two, how natural is this for you? And I'll show you some examples in a moment. So this person says this particular question, the answer is this is a very natural thing for me to do. This would be my natural way of approaching things. And then the second question, so this is an E question versus an I question, is less natural, but this is where it is. So on this slider bar, there's a couple of very useful pieces of information. One is the difference between the positioning of the two bars. So how much do I favor, in this case, extroversion over introversion? So as you can see, the little dot on the top bar is much more towards the natural than where the little symbol is on the I bar, the second bar. So that differential gives me a sense of how much I favor one over the other, so one function over the other, or in this case, extroversion and introversion. But also it gives me a sense of, in an absolute sense, is this something that's very natural for me, natural, neutral, unnatural, very unnatural. So if you look at the screen we have there, there's a certain difference between the two. Here's a second person who, as it turns out, would have, from an absolute point of view, a lower level of feeling natural with the extroverted behavior, the top bar, and certainly moving into the unnatural and the I behavior on the lower bar. But the difference between the two is still the same. So the preference of one over the other is actually the same, but the absolute values are different. And then another example here, again, further down again, this person is saying that, look at this particular, to answer this question, I would find this very, very unnatural for me. And even on the top question, it's somewhat unnatural for me also. So, how natural is it for you to? Here's some typical questions. Initiate cooperation versus prefer one-to-one personal disclosure over group sharing. So initiate cooperation, that's going to be an extroverted behavior, actually initiating cooperation with other people. And introverted behavior would be like preference would be prefer one-on-one personal disclosure over group sharing. So that would be the pairs of questions. You would use your slider bar for the first question, the cooperation question, and also the slider bar for the second one. Here's another one, making connections between ideas when talking with others, or internally connect ideas and possibilities. Again, this is an extroverted behavior, but this is, again, as we talked about, this is looking at intuition in terms of making connections between ideas. This is kind of a brainstorming piece versus internally doing that and looking at possibilities and sitting with problems. And then another question, they're discussing possibilities versus producing ideas through quiet reflection. So you can see the pairs of questions. So it's really getting you to think, which of these is more natural for me versus the other, rather than just force me into a choice, which I want A or B. And I can put the slider bar. I could even have a slider bar where I'm equally comfortable with both. and that's no problem, or maybe equally uncomfortable with both. So the next part though, and this is again, you'll find this quite different if you do a Pearman assessment. You're also asked about, okay, you're demonstrated. So, okay, in practice though, what do you do? And instead of preference now, you're saying, do I do this always, sometimes, or never? So you're actually asked the same questions again. And again, using the slider bars, you're asked, well, and we look at the questions, how often do you initiate cooperation? How often would you prefer one-to-one disclosure over group sharing? How often do you make connections between ideas when talking with others? Or how often do you internally connect ideas and possibilities? And so on. So you've now got two sets of information. You have, okay, what would be my level of comfort? But how often do I actually do this? So we then end up with a way of displaying this. And this is the way that the Pearman integrator displays this in the report. So it's using circles. Because the first thing we're going to look at is a natural versus demonstrated. So what is the relative difference between the two? Not where on the slider bar you are, but between the two. So E versus I. If you look at the E circle on the left-hand side, there's a color which is filled from the top position around to 75% of the way around the bar. So it says E75, which means that from and this is looking at the natural, from a natural preference, I have more comfort with extroverted behavior over introverted behavior. If it was at the 50%, in other words, if that circle was just half colored in, 50-50, I would be what they call blended. In other words, I have no clear preference one over the other. But in this case, this person saying, look, I do have a preference for extroverted over introversion. However, on the other side, on the demonstrated, what I'm reporting here is if I have this person saying, well, actually, I have a very slight preference, sorry, not preference, demonstrated. So more often I demonstrate introverted behaviors over extroverted, very slightly. It's just a little bit gone over the halfway mark. So as you can see that the introversion is filling clockwise, in a clockwise direction. The extroversion is filling in an anti-clockwise direction. Another piece of information, what we can see is that there's a flip. So between natural and demonstrated, there's a flip from extroversion to introversion. And also there is greater than 10 point of a difference between the two. And when there's more than 10 point of a difference, this does flag for you that this is an area then which could cause tension for you. Because if your natural preference here for this person's extroversion, but what you demonstrate maybe as a result of the type of work you're doing, the environment you're in, something like that, the people you work with, you're more introverted, it means that it's going to require psychological energy for you to do that, to be able to have the flexibility to manage winding back your extroverted preferences and winding up your introverted behaviors. Here's a second example. Here, this person, you might look and say, oh, great, this person is natural for sensing and demonstrated is also sensing as well, the S for sensing. However, if you can see, there's more than 10 of a difference in the scores. So they're saying that, 68, this is the level of comfort I have with sensing over intuition, and 68 is where the bar is, where I've moved across. But if I look on the other side, 55, there's more than 10 points of a difference. So again, because there's more than 10 points, even though there's no flip, for this person could also require psychological energy, because even though they're still more often using sensing than intuition in their demonstrated, they're actually winding it back from what their natural is. Their natural is to be even more of a sensor than what they're demonstrating. So again, likely to cause tension. You need flexibility to deal with that. Here's an interesting one where, again, you might look and say, well, okay, there's an E person has natural preference, very slight preference for extroverted behaviors, but they're demonstrated more often. They demonstrate introverted, but it's so small, it's less than 10 points. So EI, this is not going to be, typically it's not going to be requiring a lot of energy with this person. They're actually relatively comfortable with E or I. So because there's less than 10 point of a difference, unlikely to be something. So this is all part of the person gaining that self-awareness. What is likely to cause me to require energy for me? And then we look at, again, with the same thing, no flip and less than 10 point of a difference. So when you get a Pearman report, and there's lots of information on the report, but just to take one quick overview page, just to show you how this plays out. So it shows there your natural preference, see the top of the page, ISF, you demonstrate EST. But when you look at the bars down below, look at the circles, you can see the information is very, very visual in this person, how you gain and direct your mental energy. I81, E75. So again, that's going to be quite a difference. So that person has quite a clear preference for introversion, 81. You can see where it is on the bar. However, they're demonstrated to 75. So they're demonstrating quite a lot. They are often doing extroverted behavior, extroverted actions, where their preference is very much for introversion. So perhaps a person who would prefer to be working quietly away on their own, but however, the type of work they do is very much in a team environment and maybe lots of brainstorming, collaboration going on. So look down below at the next two as well, how you're taking and process information, S85, S79, not so much of a gap there. And then how you evaluate information and take decisions, F79, T77, again, a large difference between the two, being a natural feeler and a demonstrated thinker. And in the report, by the way, it goes all the way down to all 8 functions at a really detailed level. So this is just look at what an individual function page at a high level would be, feeling versus thinking. Again, in the report, you will see not just the circle score, which is F79 versus T77, but you are also given the slider bar. So this is the average of all the questions that you as a participant would have answered. And you can see where that comes out on the slider bars. You can see where that, if you look at the demonstrated T on the right-hand side, the person has the little symbol is there above the often. So they're often, quite a lot, displaying thinking behaviors over feeling behaviors, and you can also see you can see the difference between the T and the F. You can also see, if you look, there's a tiny little triangle on the bar as well, which is where the average, this is where the average of a norm group that you're being compared with would be. So if you take the left-hand side there, if we look at the natural feeling. So this person said, like for thinking, you can see where they've positioned the symbol is on the bar, just between neutral and natural. Feeling is very close to the natural. And the little bar shows where other people who have a preference and comfort level with feeling, where would their position be on average? So what we're saying here is that from a feeling point of view, compared to others who also would have feeling as a preference, about the same as them in terms of how natural it is. But this person is saying, if you look at the upper bar, slightly less comfortable than the average feeler, let's say, in terms of thinking preference. So a lot of information provided there. But where do we take all this? We really need to get it. Remember, we talked about self-awareness and adaptability. So adaptability or flexibility is when we have all this information, what do we do with it? We need to be able to use a range of psychological resources to flex how we deal with the world. So it is that capacity to draw on additional psychological resources as we need. And this is the model of flexibility that's used in the Pearman Integrator. There are 5 areas, and I'll just quickly run through what those 5 areas of flexibility are. So these again are these areas that help you to deal with situations. So the first is proactivity. So that's active problem solving, and deciding to take decisive action when faced with a challenge. Secondly is composure. That's about self-control, being patient, being level-headed. I suppose remaining calm as well and controlled when there's stress situations. Thirdly, connectivity, connecting with other people, performing mutually beneficial interpersonal relationships and reciprocating that support. Variety seeking, looking for novel experiences over routine, and being open to new opportunities to grow and develop. And then finally, rejuvenation, that positive coping strategies to maintain health and minimize stress and also manage your energies. So those are the 5 areas. So if you take leaders, like leaders who are high in those areas, and I won't read through these, you can see them there. There's quite a lot of things that those leaders are likely to do. Like, say a leader who's high or strong in composure, remains calm and collected to communicate a clear vision in high pressure environments. And is very patient in inspiring others towards innovative breakthroughs. So we can see these are very much tied to leadership behaviors. The FlexIndex scores. When you are scored on the FlexIndex, there's a separate set of questions in the assessment. Your results are now displayed, and it's not the slider bar this time, it's a ranking. Your results are displayed on a page like this. So it's a normed assessment, so 100 will be the average, and there will be a high range will be above 110, the low range will be below 90. And there's also a little diamond which shows where the average, where top leaders would be. So you get a sense of how you are versus the norm group. And then also how you rate versus top leaders. So if I look at on this particular person's report on proactivity, I can see that they're 126, so they're in the upper range in terms of being proactive. So again, they have those skills necessary for active problem solving and decision making, and they're actually above where a top leader, the average would be for top leaders. So that's really interesting to know where you are in relation to that. Versus, if I look at the bottom, rejuvenation, this person is 65, so it's on the very low end, not doing a lot in the area of rejuvenation in terms of having that flexibility, and quite a long way away from where the leadership indicator would be. So just an example, okay, how would these fit together? It's just like rejuvenation in terms of the mental function. So we talk about flexing within the functions and across the functions. So within the functions, in other words, in terms of extroverted intuiting, rejuvenation gives you the energy that you need to innovate and generate ideas. On the other side, if you looked at extroverted sensing, composure is what you need to give you that focus and that awareness. So you need a flexibility just even to completely utilize a particular function, but also across the function. So we can use variety seeking to help us. If our natural preference is let's say on the big picture brainstorming, we can use variety seeking to find things interesting over in the extroverted sensing area and behavior. So it develops the skills necessary to flex between the two types of behaviors. Again, another example, again, flexing within the function, rejuvenation can help you, provides the energy to get a fresh look at a situation in terms of being introverted intuiting. And variety seeking can allow you to access that storehouse of experience you've got to cross-reference new information on introverted sensing. And again, the cross between the two, the SI and the NI, again, you can use proactivity. So if you develop proactivity, if you've got that as a skill, it helps develop the skills necessary to flex between the two types of behaviors. So it helps you to learn and anticipate future circumstances, looking ahead, whether through relying on insights and instinct, which would be introvert NI, or data and evidence would be SI. So again, using your proactivity to access both your introverted sensing and your introverted intuiting. There's also a link to emotional intelligence, and if you have already completed the EQI2 self-assessment, you can import your EQI2 scores, and they will appear in your Pearman in an edited form, not a complete report, but some key elements will appear in your Pearman report. And there's a few things just how we might link together. So let's just say introverts will definitely benefit by developing their interpersonal relationships and assertiveness, because this is where the introverts maybe have to push themselves into some more extroverted behavior. So relationships, assertiveness skills are in that area. Sensors who tend to focus on the here and now, if they can tap into the flexibility and self-actualization, it may push them again towards using more intuitive, looking more at big picture. Again, on the opposite side, the intuitors, while they're really great people with the big picture thinking and patterns, they can, by using reality testing skills, emotional intelligence, that can push them back into grounding them back in the here and now. Thinkers who tend to think very logically rather than have a people focus, again, developing emotional expression, developing empathy can really help them to tap into the the feeling side of the personality. And then feelers who tend to be naturally interested in the people aspect, but may not look at the logic. Again, they can benefit by developing their independence and problem solving skills. Just as a very quick comparison, okay, just between Myers-Briggs, MBTI, and Myers-Briggs type indicator, just so you know at the top level. And by the way, I'm certified in both of these tools. So I'm a certified practitioner in MBTI Step 1 and Step 2. I'm a certified practitioner in Pearman. Here are the differences. Pearman, mental function level, you're asked questions right down at the very deep level. MBTI, the mental functions are based on a particular formula. There's a methodology in the background. You're based on your questions that comes up with the mental function scores. There is a developmental component of Pearman, while MBTI really does focus on self-awareness that rather than adaptability. Slider bars, Pearman uses the slider bars when you're asked pairs of questions. MBTI is dichotomies. You have a forced choice. Is it this or this, A or B? Pearman has a FlexIndex in terms of looking at the flexibility. Myers-Briggs does not. It's personality type only. And Pearman also asks questions, as we've seen, on your demonstrator type as well as your natural, while MBTI is just natural. And then all scores are presented in Pearman, so you can see everything you've scored yourself on. MBTI, you only get the scores based on the type that you've come out as. So if you come out as F, you get to see all the F information, but not the T information that isn't there. So those are the main differences just to know about them. There are lots of other Pearman in Action resources available for working with teams or working with individuals around things like resilience, leadership, the team type, so both personality and FlexIndex. Quite a lot of other additional resources available to you as a practitioner if you are going to use Pearman in coaching or in team development. So thank you for being with me today for this webinar. So I hope you've got a good understanding of Pearman from this. Thank you.